and in the Anti-Terrorism Act as well. But the requirement, sir, of money laundering requires being tautologous. Dealing with money laundering requires that we move away to the extent possible from a process-driven approach to an automatic trigger. So while it might appear that to amend the statute to go from one thing to include the word spontaneous might seem a little bit artificial, the fact is that in the area of money laundering, it is vitally important that responses are triggered with immediacy. Now, sir, many of the instances where we are changing our definitions, these situations arise because in the FATF, Financial Action Task Force, the technocrats have more or less agreed to definitions and agreed to approaches. And in that particular milieu, sir, we do have a seat at the table. And therefore, we participate robustly in those exchanges. And we therefore are caused in many instances to adopt definitions that, while they may not necessarily accord with what we feel is necessary, because they have been settled in that international media within which we're operating, we've adopted those definitions and approaches. In relation to the Financial Service Commission bill and the amendments that are set out there, sir, let me say that going back as far back as 2014, a review of our legislation demonstrated that in its regulatory role, there were a number of things that needed to be strengthened. Now, you heard me say 2014, sir, and you would know that in 2014, we were a year out of the 2013 election. But this review was done of the Financial Services Commission by the International Monetary Fund and by the World Bank. And in conducting that particular review, they felt that our legislation required particular amendments as a matter of urgency, sir. In 2014, an IMF World Bank team recommended that we amend our legislation as a matter of urgency. Now, sir, I think that's a good point on which to reflect. It is no wonder, sir, that we perform poorly in relation to where we stand when it comes to matters relating to international standards. Because in 2014, the government of Barbados was told, you need to amend this legislation urgently. And in 2019, sir, this administration is now left to do it. 2015 came and went, 2016 came and went, 2017 came and went, hallelujah, 2018 came. Now, sir, the IMF and the World Bank technical team, sir, recommended that we amend probably about 14 sections of our statute to strengthen it. Now, whatever you may feel, sir, about IMF and the World Bank and other international agencies, they are constituted by well-trained and very experienced technocrats gathered from all over the globe. In fact, Barbados has a number of people who work in these international agencies. So that whatever your personal view may be about the mores and the attitude of those institutions, when it comes to technical matters, sir, the individuals are very, very well trained and very highly regarded. But nothing came of that urgent request. Nothing at all. So it's no wonder, sir, that in 20 to possibly defend any other areas in which we are considered to be weak. But I think it's important to highlight the peer review process, because it's a peer review by our technical people from within the region, sir. So when people from Trinidad look at the Companies Act of Barbados, the Companies Act of Barbados and the Companies Act of Trinidad are virtually the same. And the other piece of legislation, we all have that common background, not just in the common law, but having pieces of legislation that have either been drafted as model laws through CARICOM or through other regional agencies. So there is benefit, sir, to participating in a Caribbean Financial Action Task Force arrangement, because we are dealing with like-minded individuals having like-minded sizes, if there's such a thing. But I think you understand what I'm trying to convey. We are dealing with other states and being assessed by other states who not only have the same or similar legislative and political and other frameworks, but we also have similar economic characteristics. Mr. Speaker, I therefore commend these three other pieces of legislation. I think that they will help Barbados to rate considerably better than we are currently rated. And I will remind the country that the matter of correspondent banking is one that is central to how we function as a state in terms of our ability to service the needs and aspirations of Barbadians. And if we do not demonstrate to the world that we are meeting the minimum standards in relation to anti-money laundering activity and financing of terrorism, then we will quite likely lose the ability to engage in trade, because countries and institutions will see Barbados as a weak link in the fight against money laundering, and will therefore choose not to either send or receive any foreign exchange from Barbados, thereby putting our economy in greater peril. With those words, sir, I'm grateful to you for allowing me to detain the chamber briefly in this post-Easter period. Beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
I rise to make a brief contribution to these pieces of legislation here today, and I will spend quite some time, perhaps, based on my former profession as a banker, because it is very, very important that a government protects itself from what could very well become a serious scourge if we allow money laundering and such like to take root in our society today. It is a very serious thing, Mr. Speaker, and we therefore have to take the necessary action or preventative action and be very serious about it. We have seen over the past, in some years, in some instances, as a matter of fact, banks have really, what I would say, done a lot of work in relation to investigation and in relation to trying to prevent money laundering from taking root within this country. And I know that there are some of us, and there are persons generally who can become, or when I was at the bank, were kind of annoyed in instances with the procedures that you had to go through for something which appeared to be simple in terms of opening an account. I must say that as an employee back then, and also being involved in politics, in the political arena, I too was subject to those same rules. Basically, even though I was an employee at the bank, because I was referred to not with my initials PRP, but PEP, which simply means a politically exposed person. And as long as you're involved in this aspect of life in Barbados, that would become your lot with any financial institution, if a financial institution is to follow what the procedures that has been set out, even by the central bank and so on, at the end of the day. Now, money laundering is a serious thing. Why us as politically exposed persons? Because there can be a lot of instances where persons can take money and they do something what you call layering, which means that you will deposit that money in small tranches within your bank account and so on, and obviously it is there, that's where you're hiding the money, where you're actually hiding the money, and it is very difficult to find, because if, for instance, you have been given let's say a $20,000 or $30,000, as a matter of fact, the threshold when the banks that has to be investigated and that you have to report on is anything in excess of $30,000. When last I checked, anything in excess of $30,000 that you deposit any into your accounts at any given point in time, you have to complete the source of funds form. The source of funds form. Now, persons could easily use money, or these money that they have gained, place it in the bank, and then from there, that is where it is taken to fund and support even terrorism at the end of the day. And we, as for one, do not want that to happen within our country. Now, as some of us would have experienced from time to time, you then have to fill out various forms with the proof of address and 2 pieces of ID and all these things, and perhaps people can find it very, very annoying and time consuming, especially if you have, let's say, the busy day in the life of politically exposed persons like we are. But it is a necessary requirement, because the banks are protecting not just you, as it may not appear that way, but the banks are protecting you as well as protecting themselves at the end of the day. Because we cannot, and we have to secure our country. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, in doing all of this, we also have to look, because I remember clearly at a point in time, and I'm not saying that this is the case here, but at a point in time there was a particular debate in this honorable house when the now Prime Minister would have exposed a particular company that was said to be associated with a particular project in St. Thomas. I can remember that pretty clearly. It hasn't come to fruition, where the company that was said to be like, it appeared like a shell company, because when you check on the internet about it, there was nothing there about this company, about its experience, and so on. So Money laundering can take because people
As indicated by not only the last speaker, the honorable member for St. Lucie, but the Attorney General, we must ensure that we protect Barbados from any rogue financial transactions, as I refer to them. This Parliament, we've had the good privilege of introducing a number of new bills to ensure that we protect Barbados's jurisdiction. And I must say that thus far, the Attorney General and his team, of course, been working very long hours in trying to ensure that Barbados's good name is protected out there. Mr. Speaker, I also make the point that the legislation or the bills that have been proposed pretty much is in response to the changing financial arena. You know, before we talked a lot about tax avoidance and tax evasion, but now in an era filled with persons who would want to cause countries harm is now gone to a new level. And therefore we have, and I do agree with the honourable member for St. Lucie, that we have to make sure we protect this jurisdiction against any terrorist activity. So that we must congratulate the government on tightening the laws to prevent money laundering, and certainly for the Attorney General and his team for amending the laws as necessary. I see this very much complementing the work of the honourable member for St. Michael North in terms of the remit in trying to stave off any challenges from the international arena to blacklist Barbados or to cause Barbados even further harm. But Mr. Speaker, I also note that the political class has held a very high standard as well. What we refer to as the PEP, the politically exposed persons. And I believe it is a high standard that we have to follow, and I accept that. I only hope that the political class is not the only class, Mr. Speaker, that will continue to be pursued in this respect. I hope that oversight will be given to other classes as well, because whereas I stand as a political operative and a member of this Parliament, I also know, sir, that it will be necessary, and I think the time has come, and I said it before, I think, in my initial contribution when we were debating the integrity bill in this very same place, that perhaps we need to expand the scope so that we hold others accountable as well as we are held to that very high standard. Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure, maybe the Attorney General will address it, but there's something that I realize that some other CARICOM countries are looking at the moment, and it has to do with legislation. Some refer to it in some jurisdictions as civil asset recovery, management, and unexplained wealth. And I believe, the Attorney General will have to tell us if he's going in that direction, but I believe it would be a good idea for this country to move to a situation where you also have unexplained wealth legislation. Because oftentimes there are persons who would come to a conclusion that a person has this and a person has that. And oftentimes, sir, we may be crisscrossing Barbados, and you recognize that certain people have tremendous wealth. I'm not questioning anybody's wealth, but I think the time has come where there's a need for such legislation in Barbados, and I will leave that to the Attorney General to respond to. Mr. Speaker, I want briefly, and I won't engage the chamber much longer, but I would like to make a few comments as it relates to the banking sector. And these comments have been addressed to me by my constituents who've been asking me for some time, why is it that they have to pay the fees that they're asked to pay by some commercial banks in Barbados. Mr. Speaker, I believe that the fees that are being charged, Mr. Speaker, sometimes are too onerous. I have had a situation where constituents have come to me and they've said, Mr. Goodinegel, I have a deposit and I put down $300, but then, you know, every month I get a $35 charge coming off of this account. And Mr. Speaker, I really don't understand it sometimes. And they are complaining to me. I can't speak for other members in this chamber, but certainly as I walk and I do my house-to-house visits, the residents are complaining to me, and complaining bitterly so, Mr. Speaker. I don't know if they complain to you, sir. So, but they complain to me. And they are questioning, why is it that they have to pay $35 some months? Why is it that they have to pay $1.50 at a minimum? And sometimes, sir, if you don't take an electronic statement, if it's mailed to you, sir. And then sometimes, sir, that you also have to, if you miss and you forget the date, to insert the date on a check, it is returned, and you have to pay $35 too. And if you forget to sign the check, sir, it's returned, and you have to pay $35. Mr. Speaker, I don't think these things are right. And in an era, sir, where there is a lot of electronic commerce going on, and there are various electronic platforms to facilitate the processing of business. And I accept that, you know, what I understand. And the issue is, why is it that a bank that will have your money, and lends your money, make good profits, Mr. Speaker, why is it that they have to charge and maintain these charges on people, and particularly people in my constituency, who obviously from time to time will not have the resources like others, sir? And this is something, a source of concern. It continues to bother them, and obviously if it bothers them, it must bother me too. So I don't know what is the solution. I don't know if a private member's bill will solve it, sir. I don't know. But I really believe that the people who sent us here to represent their interests. And I believe that the time has come where we have now to start looking at this matter through meetings or whatever means or avenues we have to look at. But we have to start looking at these things, because these fees are confusing constituents, Mr. Speaker. These views, and I am sure it's not only in my constituency, sir, but beyond my constituency. But these fees are confusing people and are causing people a lot of stress, sir. And banks are in the business to make money. No, I have no objection to that, sir. But, Mr. Speaker, the money that the constituents put into the banking system also assists with on lending for them to earn profits. And we have got to reach the point now, sir, whereby we've got to look at this. So I say, Mr. Speaker, that this aggressive level of fees and bank charges must somehow form the basis for some discussion. And I believe it, sir. It must form the basis for some discussion. The people sent us here, sir, but at the same time we have a responsibility. We can't be one-sided, but we need to have a conversation in relation to these bank charges. Mr. Speaker, I said I'm not going to be too long, but I would not have allowed this opportunity to pass on this very good day of April the 23rd, and the significance of it, to allow me not to have an intervention in respect of those persons who sent me to this parliament to represent their interests. And with those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I'm much obliged.
Honourable Member for St. James South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to join the debate in relation to the legislation that has been placed here by the Attorney General in seeking to get Barbados to be compliant with our international obligations. And today I want to address the issue of compliance because it has such an impact on our lives as regular Barbadians. And sometimes we recognize it, and there are other times when we don't. I want to congratulate the Attorney General because there is so much that they have brought here to help us in relation to our anti-money laundering requirements, all the other requirements in terms of tax compliance, the Ministry of Industry and International Business, the Honourable Member for St. Michael North. He has worked assiduously to be able to help us bring some kind of protection to our international business sector. I just want to speak a little bit on the issue of what the cost of that compliance means to us as Barbadians. These pieces of legislation and the requirements that they generate produces tremendous pressures on small island states like ours. Because each demand asks of us to either put something in place which may cost us money. It may ask us to put something in place which certainly costs for a lot of time from the civil service to be able to put it together and make sure that it is passed. It puts pressure on our resources. And every time this happens, that we have to comply with something that the international community is asking us to do, where it's demanding time, money, or resources, it means that those things, the time, the resources, the people, the money, has to be diverted from another area that is of priority to Barbados. Every time we have to spend money to run and defend ourselves in some international arena, that is something that we could have used that money to fix a road, to provide some housing, to do things that are critical to Barbadians. And it is a real challenge for small island states like ours to be able to make our way in this big international community which seeks to set rules, make demands that do not take into consideration the issues of small island developing states. And in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, we are tasked with the responsibility of constantly putting the case for small islands like ours in those international bodies, to speak up against some of the demands that they make upon us, to put the case as to why you need to give us special and differential treatment. And what we have are a cadre of officers within Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, people who work in our missions abroad, whose job every day is to get up and be able to go and defend, put a case, research, argue for what is in the best interest of small developing states like ours. But let me be frank with the country and let me be frank with the Parliament. It is very, very difficult sometimes to get those big countries to shift their demands, even though you make a strong, reasonable case that a reasonable person would see, okay, in this case, we could make an adjustment. But every day we are involved in many different arenas, seeking to put protections in place for ourselves and our people, while at the same time trying to honor the obligations which have been put on us. And therefore, the Barbados Labour Party administration has been doing an excellent job in trying to bob and weave between the two things, while at the same time trying to stay on course with hauling our economy out of the difficult situation that is in and being able to meet the needs. There are a number of arenas in which we have to fight. At the WTO, the World Trade Organization, we have ambassadors and civil servants up there whose job every day is to go in and make representation for the very best trade conditions so that our enterprises and businesses here in Barbados have the best possible platform on which to engage in trade across the region and across the world. And at times it is not easy. And I want to be able to commend Ambassador Chad Blackman, who has been appointed to a committee as chair to lead the case in relation to trade facilitation and trade development for this region. And I want to say that at the WTO, for example, part of the compliance they're looking for, and is something that we are seeking to deal with, they're looking at countries that do not comply with the requirements that are set out in the World Trade Organization. And what they sometimes fail to understand is that because we have limited resources, you have limited numbers of people who can pay attention to any one particular issue. When we go up to deal with climate change, you probably have about 4 or 5 people that we can put together to work on something like climate change. When America is dealing with it, they have 30 or 40 or 100 people who work on it. So we're always up against a big disadvantage. And one of the things now that we're going to have to battle in the international arena is that they are seeking to discuss whether or not they should put consequences on
concern that haunts this Parliament and has haunted it, Mr. Speaker, sir, for many, many years, certainly throughout you're now forcing me, sir, to reflect, for about 14, 15 years that I've had the privilege of being on the precincts of this place. And Mr. Speaker, as I listened to the honourable member who just took his seat, I share his concern, I share his passion, I share, Mr. Speaker, sir, the depth of feeling about what is really the hypocrisy of the situation that finds this sovereign Parliament of Barbados doing that which we have to do, but in circumstances, Mr. Speaker, that are nothing short of unpleasant. No, sir, let me start as a point of departure by saying that when we come here to amend the legislation with respect to the requirement for us to better guard against the effects and the ravages of money laundering, when we amend legislation to prevent against corruption, when we amend legislation, Mr. Speaker, sir, to make sure that we reduce the opportunity for people to profiteer in the trafficking of narcotics and illegal drugs or in guns and weapons, Mr. Speaker, we do all of these things because of the fact that by doing so, we ensure that our standards as a country are kept high. And we do so, Mr. Speaker, sir, because we want to ensure that the cleanliness of the reputation of the jurisdiction of the country called Barbados is kept clean, is kept, Mr. Speaker, sir, in such a state of affairs that all of us as Barbadians can hold our heads high and feel proud. But the reality is, Mr. Speaker, sir, as the Honourable Member for St. James South alluded to in her very comprehensive speech before this House, we were here a few weeks ago dealing with similar matters. And if the truth is to be told, Mr. Speaker, sir, we were here a few months ago, I think at the close of last year, when the Honourable Member for St. Michael North would have brought a menu of pieces of legislation because we had to be compliant with certain external requirements, and we were compliant. And even though, Mr. Speaker, we came with 13, I believe, pieces of legislation, and we brought about a convergence of our tax policy in Barbados, the first of its kind in the Eastern Caribbean, aimed specifically at bringing to an end this never-ending form of harassment that comes across the Atlantic in our direction, and not only us, in the direction of all of the countries of the Caribbean, and that is the board I really wish to speak to, Mr. Speaker, sir. We then hear shortly after that the issue is not that which we have done, but the substance of the business that takes place here, and that is just another way of reopening another avenue for another effort, another avalanche of difficulty put in the path of governments of small island developing states which are trying to make sure that they can maintain a developmental trajectory for their people and for their very fragile economies. And so, Mr. Speaker, so we find ourselves caught in this situation where, on one hand, we must preserve, and quite rightly so, the image and the reputation of our jurisdiction. And on the other hand, we are pressured, even as we do that, to do more and more again, because the international community believes that the panacea, the answer, the little pill that they will swallow to bring an end to all of their domestic woes is by coming down more heavily on the Caribbean. And if you had doubt, Mr. Speaker, sir, that that was the mentality of those folks, all you had to do was to be listening to CNN last night when about 6 or so of the Democratic field of contenders, you know, there's a 2020 taking place in the United States next year. There will be 20 Democratic contenders in the year 2020 for president. And one by one, they appeared in a town hall meeting in succession. Senator Kamala Harris, Senator Bernie Sanders, Senator Amy Klobuchar, Senator Elizabeth Warren, all the big wigs. And you know, Mr. Speaker, sir, all said the same thing about this issue. All said the same thing. And that is what I wish to speak to today, Mr. Speaker, sir. Because while the Attorney General has come and done that which the Attorney General of Barbados must do, this Parliament is a sovereign Parliament that must use opportunities of this nature, in my view, to reflect on the broad circumstances which cause us to be here and spending the public's time on matters of this nature with such ever-increasing frequency. Never-ending story, Mr. Speaker, sir. A never-ending story when we have issues of a developmental nature that we must be able to prioritize. So what then is the solution of the Democrats? Senator Sanders would tell you that you have to close down these offshore entities. He starts with the Cayman Islands and he tacks on the Caribbean behind it. Senator Elizabeth Warren, same thing, that you have to bring an end, Mr. Speaker, sir, to the financial sectors, the offshore financial sectors in the Caribbean. And as repeated by all of them last night. But where, Mr. Speaker, did we begin on this journey? Because all of us who know a little bit about the history of Barbados know that there was a period of time when sugar was king, not financial services. There was a period of time, Mr. Speaker, sir, where we dealt with an economy that was primarily driven by labor-intensive effort. The working class man in my constituency, sir, went and cut cane, and through the sweat of his brow, he did eat bread. And we were told, the country was told, that the time had come for us to move away from that. And the international community, led by the United States of America, urged upon us a view. The same United States of America, led at the time by a man called Ronald Reagan, says, well, you know, international financial services are the way to go. And they argued, sir, that this was the way to go for what they call very good and compelling reasons, that you had to diversify the base of your economy, that you can't only have a monoculture, as in sugar, or in St. Lucia next door, bananas, or whatever other major enterprise it was, whatever major industry. Let capital work for the economy, we were told. And we were also told, Mr. Speaker, sir, that because we were liberal, bourgeois, post-colonial democracies, that private enterprise must be the order of the day. Private enterprise, nobody in Barbados had a challenge with it. Everybody who had a little holding, however small it is, you know what it is, your little small thing, this is your private enterprise. We're familiar with the concept. But they felt in North America and in Canada and in England that there was some benefit to coming to the Caribbean because private investment could be located in the Caribbean, even if only for the purposes of running the books while the physical effort on the physical production was done elsewhere. And so, Mr. Speaker, sir, we became places where these people wanted to have asset protection. Why do they want to protect their assets, you ask? Because it is felt that there was less risk legally, less risk politically, less risk economically to them if the assets were supposed to be located somewhere in the Caribbean, even if only in a formal structure. Well, the bulk of that which is the enterprise, the work, the sweat of the brow, the production line is located elsewhere. And then, Mr. Speaker, sir, they tell us that they want to also be able to do estate planning, where you're going to administer the most in the most favorable setting, the most favorable legal setting, the administration of the business. And so for those reasons, sir, the democracies of the Caribbean, which with the exception of one or two instances, Grenada being one, Trinidad and Tobago being another, for the most part, perfectly peaceful, perfectly law-abiding jurisdictions. The body ain't doing nothing with the body money. Yes, there were one or two states where there was an experiment with democratic socialism. But the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, sir, they all felt that this was the model we should follow. What happened? And that's the question that we must now ask ourselves, and I commend the minister in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, because this is not but the first step to ask the question, what has changed? Because it was the perfect solution. It was the model foisted upon us. No Prime Minister Barbados said this is what we want to do. This is what was suggested as being the way forward back when Reagan was holding sway about this place, Mr. Speaker, sir. And then we have now come to witness the change in thought pattern in the metropole. Then the North Atlantic now does not believe anymore the way they felt back in the 70s and the 80s. They do not see us the way they felt back then. So that now you hear, to become President of the United States of America, you must make a pledge that you will shut down the livelihood of small island developing states who are centers of financial activity that you created as being centers of financial activity, that you urged to go down the road of being centers of financial activity, but that don't suit you no more. So to become President of the United States today, the first point of departure in a campaign is to land-base the Caribbean. Now, so we have to call out hypocrisy when and where we see it. We have to. We ain't at school for no good reason. If you don't call the spade a spade. And it's not to beat upon anybody, because we must sit at the table as equals. We must sit in the world's bodies as equals. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I don't know that the UN having a big building, or the ones in Washington, the multinationals in Washington having their large multi-story building, give them bigger brains. Mr. Speaker, sir, I think that all of us have a common interest in the well-being of mankind, or so I would hope. And the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, that I grow tired, because I went through this, as I said, now this is going 15 or more years. I sat on that side of the house, sir. Sat on this side. I've listened to the speeches. Older members who have gone on. Young ones, a young member who just spoke. And it begins to sound as though we are in the land, sir, in the book of Lamentations. In the King James Version, I think it is 3. Chapter 3 of the King James Version, sir. When it is said, I am the man that hath seen affliction. We're beginning to sound that way, as though we are the people, and all we can say is that we have seen affliction. that they've set us in dark places as though we may be dead. And the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, sir, there are some tangible things that I believe we must do. And I urge on the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here in Barbados, no, we're on the body. Take the lead. Take the lead. When last I spoke in this House 3 weeks ago, Mr. Speaker, sir, on this subject, I made the point that Belize had come to a point, sir, where they were confronted with a situation as a result of banks deciding that the risk was too high to do business in Belize. Because all this is linked back. They tell you, well, you got to have your legislation got to be in a certain way. And when you cover that, then they come back and look at it from a different way. But do you know your customers? Can you satisfy us that you know your customer's customer? And you come to a point, Mr. Speaker, sir, as happened in Belize, when they said, well, look, the risk is too great. They had 9 banks there that lost their correspondent banking linkages. 9. In a small country like Belize, left with 1 bank in that country that had correspondent banking linkages that could move money, that people, little children going to university overseas could be able to have school fees paid, that people doing business can get paid for a transaction, Mr. Speaker, sir. People who are doing all the things they tell them to do. But with a stroke of a pen, somebody in the North Atlantic decide that that has to come to an end, and the whole society is thrown into a state of contingency and turmoil and uncertainty. And I say to this place, sir, that, you know, it is all about, they argue, it is all about transparency. Every time we come here, the leader, the person piloting the bill, whether it be the minister responsible for international business or the Attorney General, speaks to the language of ensuring there's greater transparency. And that is what we must do. But you know, it has the exact opposite effect. Because ultimately, sir, you come to a point where the transparency you're searching for will disappear. And you will be forcing ever increasingly transactions to go into the shadows. Because people will have to pay bills. People will have to import things in all of these small islands. None of us can function without importation. Ask the Minister of Finance. None of us, Mr. Speaker, sir. And that has to happen, but it can't happen in transparent, bright light if you make the system so difficult that people lose their correspondent banking privileges. They lose their connections financially with the rest of the world. You blacklist them and say, don't do business with them. How do the people of the Caribbean eat? And that is the discussion that should be coming, that should be being had in this country. When I hear and I read in the paper and I hear the news of a resurgent Democratic Labour Party, which remained mute out of ignorance and also, I believe, out of a sense of selfishness and malice. While these things unfolded for 10 years, Mr. Speaker, sir, while we sat on the opposition benches and railed against the silence of the leader of the land at the time and the disinterest of his cabinet in the matters at the time, and they come back to say, they're reborn. They're reborn. But, Mr. Speaker, so what is the substance of what they're born to do or reborn to do? This is the issue that is burning and crying out for discussion in Barbados. And not only in Barbados, sir, but I say to the Honourable Member for St. James South, across this region. And there are a few things I want to suggest. The first thing I want to suggest, Mr. Speaker, sir, because I do not believe that this can only be about the lamentation, that, you know, someone has turned their face against me and set me in dark places so that I will be dead. I ain't about that. I believe, sir, that you don't throw up your hands and say you can't do better. The first thing we have to do, Mr. Speaker, sir, is to reach out so that there is a discussion taking place with non-governmental organizations globally And I think that a partnership must be formed with the intellectual community at the University of the West Indies and other places, and the governments, and the non-governmental organizations. Why the non-governmental organizations, Mr. Speaker, sir? Because we all know that the politicians in the North American countries, Canada and the United States, and in England and in Europe, they are driven, sir, by the policy papers. They're driven by that upward flow of information that shapes the minds of the hundreds and thousands and yes, millions and millions of people that they preside over. And part of the discussion must now be, in the same way we did it with international trade and the implications of having a one-size-fits-all approach to trade, as though you could treat little Barbados, whose contribution to international trade might be 0.000 in the same way that you would treat a giant like the United States of America. Can't possibly happen. We can't distort the body trade. We hardly trade anything. So therefore, you have to have special rules built into the system now to give separate and special and differential treatment to countries like ours. And we have to have that kind of scholastic approach to what we are now doing in the realm of commercial banking and international financial banking systems. Mr. Speaker, sir, the architecture of the international financial system has to be picked apart and put together again so that you can safeguard against corruption, you can safeguard against terrorism and financing of terrorism and money laundering. But at the same time, you cannot do it in such a way as to destroy vulnerable small economies. You can't. And therefore, sir, you have to be engaging people like CARE International and Consumers International and Third World Network and, Mr. Speaker, sir, the International Chamber of Commerce. Those entities that are non-governmental but are specifically focused on the financial system and the financial system as it operates and impacts upon the small developing countries of the world. We must engage them, not only from a lamentation perspective as a government that is targeted, but also, sir, from an intellectual perspective, so that those brains at Cave Hill and at Mona and at St. Augustine, and we all know that the truth of the matter is that the University of the West Indies now is seen internationally as a place where all of their departments are looked upon as being possessed of the kind of academic rigor that gives the university a level of respect and credibility in the eyes of their peers globally. And therefore, we must deploy them as part of the effort. In the same way, we must do it with climate change, because it's, again, another part of the discussion. The climate change discussion is a discussion in which the rest of the world has, well, not say the rest of the world, the United States of America in particular, especially under this leadership, has one perspective, but we live a different reality. You know, and again, the same thing last night. I watched CNN, and the thinking before the Democrats came on, you hear the Republican president, oh, but there's no conclusive science, says he. There's no conclusive science. But what is the reality that we live every summer? That the 3 and 4 category of 5 hurricanes passing through, and they live it too. They live in a Texas that don't see water. They live in a California that hardly sees water, and that has been the case for decades now. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, they understand also that the oil industry, the oil and gas sector in the United States of America, finances and causes people to say the things that they say in defiance of the obvious and in defiance of the science, because the pockets of the oil and gas sector run the economy. But we have to live with the consequential fallout of the global warming. And the quality of life being compromised because of the global warming. These are the discussions that have to be led, and it can only be led by us because we suffer more. We ain't got nowhere else to go. So therefore, Mr. Speaker, we are disproportionately affected. And we must frame the alliance and encourage the conversation. But I go further, sir, because I don't only believe that you go with respect to the non-governmental community internationally. I believe that the honourable member for St. James South is correct when she pointed to countries of like mind, because they are countries which are similarly circumstanced. They are countries who go through this same thing that we are going through financially. And this is not the only minister responsible for international business who has had to go through this turmoil over the last few months. And let us not fool ourselves, it hasn't ended. So therefore we must build alliances so that when once our leader speaks at the UN, or our Minister of Foreign Affairs speaks at the UN, that part of the dialogue that's already, the framework has already been set, that there are some fundamentals, that when you hear Barbados speak, by extension, you will be hearing the rest of the region speak. By extension, you'll be hearing the small islands of the Pacific speak. By extension, you'll be hearing the small islands around the world speaking. Because we are all similarly affected and similarly circumstanced in this matter. And then, Mr. Speaker, sir, the one that nobody wants to accept we must do, but I will go to my grave saying we failed ourselves, having not done it, but we must do it. Let us reach out to our diaspora. And now there's no better time than now. Next year, those senators who I referenced at the start of this speech will be going into Queens in New York. They're going into Chicago. They are going, Mr. Speaker, sir, into every large city doing what politicians must do. Go and beg for support. But they can't set the agenda for themselves. The agenda must be set for them. When they go, our people must be so much in appreciation of the issues here at home that they must say, but Senator Sanders, well, you know, I vote Democrat, but here was Star. Here was. I understand that you say you would like to shut down all the offshore financial sectors, all the offshore business to be found in the Caribbean. But you know, Barbados' economy turns in large measure on that. So explain to me how that will work. Because you got family there, that is going to send them a little something, a little trala. And that little trala can't stretch because things rough out here already. That is the dialogue that has to happen. They may not ever see Senator Sanders, or Senator Klobuchar, or Senator Harris, or any of the others, because they may only see the people that are sent out in their name. But the message must remain the same, Mr. Speaker, sir. The message must remain the same, and it must resonate, because that is the strength that we have. It's all well and good to say we small, we are. And this country, 300,000 people living here. But you know that there are far more Barbadians living out there. And people with a Barbadian interest, and people with a Caribbean interest, and people with a concern for our way of life and what is happening to it. And we have to find a way of getting that front burner. We have to get that top of mind in the awareness, sir, of the people who have a right to vote. So that it's not just about whether or not you have some issues on the border at the south, or whether or not you have sufficient beds for the migrant children who you've snatched from their parents, or whether or not you have enough judges at the southern border who are in a position to make a decision on a matter regarding immigration there and then. There are other issues as well. And that is part of the dialogue, sir, that we have to have. Now, we have been very reluctant to flex that kind of muscle, because I genuinely believe that for the most part, we don't feel either in Barbados or outside in the Caribbean that we fully understand. I don't feel that we fully understand the influence that we have. But when it comes time for elections, as you know, sir, And as anybody who has ever faced the people know, when it comes time for elections, if you got 2 ears pin on to the side of your head, you will learn to listen and you will internalize people's problems, because the fear of failure is what is confronting you then. And I believe, sir, that now is the time for us to begin this movement in the United States of America. Similarly, Great Britain is not far away from having to confront this too, nor Canada. And the voices of the people who are affected must be heard. Yes, the objective conditions are correct. Now is the time. But, sir, what we cannot ever do is to fall back and say that this is a hopeless case and feel it is sufficient to come to Parliament every 3 months and say, oh, woe is me. Things are so bad. And Mr. Speaker, sir, that, they have turned their face against me and set me aside in a dark place. I might be as though I am dead. Mr. Speaker, sir, that cannot be it. That is not policy. We are small, yes, but we have influence. We have voice. Collectively, Mr. Speaker, sir, we have power, and we must flex that power in the interest of the people we represent, because this is governance from across borders. How dare they tell our finance minister, duly elected by our people, given a mandate that no other finance minister or prime minister has had in the history of Barbados' democracy, that when she decides that she is going to converge taxes in Barbados, man, I got enough. That don't suit me. Come again. But who make them? Who make them? And Mr. Speaker, sir, they would not allow anybody to do it to them. So if we don't treat our democracy as though it means something to us, then they will treat it as though it means nothing to them. And I honestly feel, sir, that the reality behind this here is that, yes, what we are doing has to be done in large measure because we have a duty to ensure that we have certain standards that we meet. And we have a duty, Mr. Speaker, to make sure that the image of the reputation of the country in terms of its financial sector is clean. But we also, sir, know that we have been very reasonable and very responsible for the most part. There was a little period of time there when the last 10 years or so some strange things happened, but we were very responsible for the most part. And Mr. Speaker, sir, there's got to be a point at which you draw the line in the sand, though. You can't keep pushing the line a little bit further across forever, though. And that time has come. And I say, Mr. Speaker, sir, that I feel that the honourable member, representing as she does the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I think that she and her illustrious colleague in the Senate, I think that their task is a very straightforward task. We have, because we understand this thing very well, we know that it requires some leadership. Let us provide it. I think, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we can make every international forum a forum in which these issues are discussed. We must build the bridges, the alliances with the scholastic community internationally, because it does not withstand scholarly analysis that this can be what democracy is reduced to. It does not withstand scholarly analysis. And we also know, Mr. Speaker, sir, that politicians being what they are around the world, now is the time for voices to be ringing in the ears of those who would be President of the United States if they could. That to get there, you have to be able to factor in how you're going to deal with these people who are truly representative of the third border. And we have to bring all of these things into the constellation and at the discussion table, sir, lest our people be the ones who suffer. I am obliged to you.
Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me first begin by thanking members of the House for their words of comfort on the passing of my mother. My family is deeply moved as we go through this tough time. In this debate, sir, as I listened to the previous presentations, certainly my mother was never one for self-pity. And I think if the public of Barbados is certainly listening to this presentation, or these presentations, they will get the sense that this is a government, sir, that whilst the climate, sir, has changed, that this government intends to put the welfare, sir, of this country first, and to start to chart or continue, sir, to chart a path that will allow Barbados to navigate the challenges that confront us. And sir, these issues being debated today, as the honourable member for St. James Central would have articulated, there's nothing new here. But I want, sir, for the benefit, through you, sir, to reflect on a number of the policy decisions that certainly governments in Barbados and certainly in the region would have undertaken, and how, sir, we have found ourselves caught almost in a web by choosing to follow that which has been at times dictated to us, and at others made to feel as if this is the new way to go. And I want to first start, sir, by just making reference to, as the honourable member for St. James North spoke to, the notion of international business, the notion, sir, of...
St. James Central, not
St. James Central, sorry. The notion of international business as an avenue for activity, and how we found ourselves now here debating today, talking about money laundering, and the consequence of that, and how it relates to the financial services, the financial institutions that help to build out growth and an economy, sir. And I want to start, sir, with the very nature of international business, if you like, and reflect, because I just did, sir, a quick Google search as the member for St. James Central was speaking about the public policy being announced in the 1980s under the Reagan administration. And I reflected, sir, on it. And I typed in the Iran-Contra affair, sir. Because at a time when we were being encouraged to go into international business and to expand in that space. And just for the benefit of, for clarity, sir, the Iran-Contra affair was related to the sale, sir, of arms to Iran, and the proceeds of those sales from the United States, sir, were used, or in part, were used to fund the Contras in Nicaragua. No, sir.
It was the infamous Oliver North? Sorry, what it?
There was, sir.
Right.
But the very definition of that, sir, is money laundering. Money laundering at the heart of that. But, sir, it didn't happen through U.S. institutions. It happened, sir, through, I suppose, modes, what we call international business companies, setting up and being facilitating these transactions. And so we are here today, sir, discussing what we should do to become compliant in a money laundering setting, where we were encouraged, as the previous speakers would have indicated, to get involved in international business and providing these services. But, sir, these issues, as the world has changed and technology certainly has taken root globally, The ability, sir, of countries like ours and the ability of those in the South, sir, to push and advance their own agenda has meant, sir, that a lot of the financial activity that we now can do to benefit our citizens and to leverage is, in a sense, sir, a real threat to countries in the North Atlantic, or they perceive that it is a threat to them. And so when you look, sir, at all of the fundamental issues now relating to anything to do with money laundering, anything to do with terrorism financing, sir, these developed countries, sir, are pretty much the experts when it comes to terrorism financing and money laundering. And the evidence is there, sir. The evidence is there. There is no, at least to my knowledge, sir, to my knowledge, which I am prepared, sir, to be corrected once the evidence is provided, no bank in the Caribbean, no bank in Barbados, sir, has been fined or investigated by anybody, as far as I'm aware, for anything relating to terrorism financing. None of the companies that work or domicile in the Caribbean, sir, as far as I'm aware, have been linked to terrorism. But as I say, sir, I am prepared to be corrected if that is the case. Because, sir, we rely on performing due diligence in collaboration, sir, with many of the tax authorities and the security agencies internationally, sir, before we get into issuing licenses and these kinds of things to persons who seek to do business in this space, sir. And so, whilst we have always wanted to make sure that we do business the right way, I think the member for St. James Central has hit the nail on the head quite clearly, sir, that we continue to pursue this perfection driven by perhaps the obsession, sir, of persons who may be jealous that as small islands we can achieve a level of development beyond that which they believe that we deserve, and therefore will want to stunt our development by constantly creating, sir, or manufacturing, I should say, hurdles that causes us, from a reputational standpoint, to always be trying to become compliant. And, sir, these are issues that, as small countries, we are constantly grappling, because when the Google search says, sir, and it says senior administration officials secretly facilitated, now it goes on to say that obviously Iran was under an arms embargo, so really and truly, sir, it's illegal. There's no secret facilitation, sir. It is illegal. Illegal. And when things like this happen, sir, it always comes down to who has the power, in a sense, sir, to make things go away. And then in the context, sir, of small countries trying to chart a path for the development of its citizens, we always find ourselves, sir, going cap in hand, as the member for St. James Central would have indicated, having to make a case, sir, constantly, having to make a case that the activity that we seek to engage in, sir, is beneficial to our citizens, and that we engage in that activity, sir, not because there's anything wrong with it, sir. We go through a fairly rigorous checklist, if you like, which is often, sir, pretty much determined by these very people, whether it's the EU, OECD, whoever it is. They create a checklist, sir, and you check every box. And when you're done check every box, sir, it's still a problem. But, sir, we hit a little snag. A little snag. Because just like the arms were sold to Iran, sir, and monies then went to Nicaragua, we find ourselves in a situation now, sir, that was 1985 when it came to light. In 1985 is when it came to light. But it started in 81. But we find ourselves in a situation, sir, where not too long ago, a Bermudan company pays a government minister in New York, sir, and now Barbados, for a transaction, sir, that presumably took place in Barbados, but the monies never came here, in much the same way as the money never passed through the United States back then. And we find ourselves in a situation, sir, where the country, and certainly those of us in this chamber, find ourselves in a situation where we now have, in a real sense, sir, to rebuild the reputation, not just of the country, sir, but the reputation of those who seek to serve in this place. Because these are matters, sir, that no matter how you look at it, will create or would have created, sir, in the minds of people that this notion of corrupt politicians, the notion of money laundering, and all of these issues now, sir, are clouded because of an individual who sat in this place and did the very same thing on the face of it, sir, no different to the structure in terms of what happened in the Iran-Contra affair, you know, sir. No different, but it creates a problem for Barbados. And so to the extent that we are here today, sir, not just to pass legislation, but through our own action, sir, as a government, to make sure that at every juncture, sir, that as we do the people's business, that it is done in a way, sir, that anybody, any part of the world, sir, can look on and say that has passed the smell test. Because we, sir, have to grapple with this. Because the reputation, sir, of Barbados has taken a hit. And we must work doubly, triply hard, sir, for as long as we can to make sure that not just that we pass legislation, sir, but we root out, sir, corruption, that we root out any element of money laundering or any element of terrorism financing, sir. And not just we in this chamber, sir, but the people of Barbados must be a part of this solution, sir. And this is not by any means, sir, an easy undertaking. Because there are some real issues confronting us right now, sir, that, with your permission, I'd like to bring to the attention of the chamber and the country. The reality is, sir, that decisions are being taken outside of Barbados as we go through this Barbados economic recovery and transformation, sir, that on the one hand, whilst we try to navigate and to keep focus on what we are doing here in this domestic space, that potentially, sir, has the capacity to pretty much unravel everything that we know. And the reality is that the member for St. James Central has hit the nail on the head consistently, sir. If, sir, it is deemed that he always hits the nail on the head. If it is deemed, sir, that for some reason, and I'll give you an example, if for some reason it is deemed that offerings in a church setting, sir, is risky, and therefore banking institutions are no longer going to provide banking services to churches, sir, that becomes a problem. Why? Because it's part of our culture, sir. People go to church and they put a little $2 or $5 in the collection, sir. That collection is taken up and deposited into the banking system. Now, sir, there is I know the bishop, the member for St. Michael West is here, but from a operational or practical standpoint, sir, there is no difference between putting $2 in the church collection or putting $2 in the slot machine out in Marl Hill Street here, sir. Because whether you're the pastor or the owner of the operation, sir, you have to go to the bank and deposit this money. And so therefore, the issue of risk associated with the activity is the same. The purpose may be different, but the issue underlying it is the same. And if decisions are being taken outside of the jurisdiction of Barbados as to how do you treat these activities, and mind you, sir, cash is legal tender. And so long as the cash is not counterfeit, sir, it is legal tender, it is acceptable. But we have a situation, sir, where persons' accounts are being closed without giving the opportunity, in a real sense, sir, having not had any indiscretions flagged. But people's accounts are being closed because of the perception of risk. And the reality, sir, is that whilst I speak in these terms, the country needs to come to grips with that this is a reality, and the government now has to find a solution, sir, that solves a myriad of problems in a relatively short space of time. And this is where, sir, change in perhaps culture, thinking, behavior is going to be critical. Because there's no simple solution to these problems. Because a person setting up to do business legitimately, whether you're selling snow cones, you're selling coconuts on the side of the road, all of us in this chamber, sir, we all buy coconut water. But when that coconut vendor goes to deposit money into a bank, sir, and the bank says, well, how do I know that this is legitimate activity? All of us in this chamber, all of our constituents, sir, buy coconut water. These, sir, are issues that we now have to focus on and bring a solution for. Because inasmuch as these are pretty much activities that regular Barbadians will engage in without even thinking, sir, the vendor over the weekend, lots of money was spent in those things with the member for Christchurch South. But the reality is, sir, if the banks determine today that those vendors who are going to deposit the few dollars that they got over the weekend, sir, decided that they're uncomfortable, it means that we expose ourselves, sir, to a situation where, because of these decisions being taken outside, persons now have to do, well, what are you going to do with this money? It becomes a security risk. People now have to find ways of managing this cash. Now, part of it, sir, there's perhaps a digital solution to the process. But even with a digital solution, sir, if the perception of the activity, which is legitimate activity, whether it is the offering in a church, whether it is the guy outside Marl Hill Street here in the slot machines, the coconut vendor, the barber, sir, if there's a perception of risk and the tolerance of risk is driven by the fines, sir, the fines that are being imposed in the European and the North American jurisdictions, and they're looking at the activity that is taking place in their jurisdiction and assuming that somehow or the other that extends to ours, that they're not going to withdraw from the market, sir, then we have a problem. And it is in that context, sir, that the citizen through you, sir, we need to get an appreciation that things, as I said at the beginning, the climate has changed. And because the climate has changed, sir, we have a responsibility to make sure that we put Barbados in a position where we can not just tick the boxes, sir, because I don't believe that just ticking the boxes will suffice anymore. We must determine for ourselves where we're going strategically with our economy, and in so doing, whether it is the OECD, EU, or whoever else may come about, sir, after, to say this is legitimate activity in Barbados. This is how it is financed. This is the information associated with the activities or the transactions in those sectors. Such that the notion of, in a sense, sir, whilst we may not want people to know our business, and the truth is, sir, there's nothing wrong with privacy. The reality is, sir, is that unless we create a space, an open space, in my view, where any scrutiny that is applied, sir, allows for the assessments to be done without almost, as my grandmother used to say, stop peeping upon the people. Not to me. Not to me. But the point is, it's a saying, sir, we have to create a space, sir, where we provide information about what is being done without feeling as if somehow or the other, sir, not the government, but without feeling as if people have to know every single detail of your business. I do not know what is the right balance, sir. I don't know what is the right balance. But the only way that I can see, sir, that we start to change the narrative around all of this, sir, is for Barbadians to have an appreciation that, on the one hand, whilst we want, as a government, persons to pursue whatever activity they wish to pursue, because we have given a commitment, sir, that we want to have young people, sir, all Barbadians for that matter, engage in any opportunity, whether at home or abroad, sir, that in order for that to happen, people must simply have the ability to actually do business. And if we are not prepared, sir, as citizens, as business people, to say, look, this is my business. These are the transactions in my business that will withstand scrutiny, sir, then I fear that we will forever be going down this rabbit hole of coming here every so often, changing this and changing that, and just confusing people. And the reality is, sir, is that this is going to be, I think, one of the most fundamental things that we have to do for a generation. Because unless we are prepared, sir, to, in a sense, give account, which means, sir, and for a lot of persons in the country, we have to change our mindsets with respect to the provision of basic information. And the reality is, sir, is that for the most part, whilst persons may fear, and I know that we are in the process of bringing some legislation as it relates to data protection, but the reality of where we are today, sir, is that we are living in an information age. And Barbados must be a part of that information age. And I believe, sir, that so long as we stake out clearly what it is we are doing, these are the terms in which we intend to operate for what we're doing, sir, and we share the information with the relevant authorities when we see things happening, sir, and we are forthright, then anytime anybody, whether it is the Financial Action Task Force, the EU, the OECD, whatever acronym they come up with next, sir, that Barbados must always be there to be able to say that not just that we compliant, sir, but we are leading the charge with respect to the transformation of how we do business in this country. And I believe, sir, that if we do that, then we will start to change the narrative with respect to whether we comply or not. Because the reality is, sir, that with the technology that is available today, we can change this narrative and we can change it for the better of our citizens. But, sir, it means that we must come to grips, as I said, with the fact that there are things happening within our jurisdiction that we got to take care of. We got to talk about it. We got to be honest about it. And the reality is, sir, that whilst there is a lower perception of corruption, our metrics internally, sir, and the perception of risk as being done now with respect to the closing of bank accounts for this purpose and the next is being driven purely by external data analytics. And the reality is that if data is being provided or analyzed externally and there's a gap for Barbados, then that gap is perceived as a risk. And therefore, our ability, sir, as a country, our ability as a government to close that gap, which means that the very nature of how we record things, how we record transactions, the very nature of that, sir, of how we do business will have to change. Because as the world is driven by big data and becoming more and more so, and as we go along that path, unless Barbados comes truly into the information age, sir, then we're going to find ourselves always playing catch up when we should not. And notwithstanding the fact, sir, that the last 10 years, there was perhaps no interest, no deliberation at all in this space, the reality is that we are now trying to remedy a situation that has been left unattended, perhaps deliberately, perhaps because there was no interest in the area, or perhaps, sir, they were focused on other things. But the reality, it is left to this government, sir, not to get embroiled in definitions per se, but to make sure that we put the necessary framework and mechanisms in place, sir, to transform what is currently a problem and turn it into a solution for providing opportunities for our citizens. And so, Mr. Speaker, I am happy to support this bill and the accompanying legislation that we are debating today, because this is a very serious challenge. I believe that we can turn this into an opportunity for our citizens. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Honourable Member for St. Joseph.
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful for first of all, the congratulatory remarks of my colleagues in the chamber, but I would like to mention as I wrap up this debate that while I'm happy to take some credit, there's been an awful lot of work being done behind the scenes to bring us to this point. In order to achieve the kinds of success that we needed to achieve, an interministerial committee has been set up, which has been working hard, and then a committee of senior public servants and technical advisors was also set up last year to consider exactly how we approach the matter of our continuing assessment, and also the degree to which we incorporate our new standards and so on into our existing legislation and practices. I'd like to mention to the chamber that while compliance with the standards are generally legislative based, there are also a large number of systemic things that we have to address so as to be fully compliant. So we can be technically compliant by virtue of amending the statute, but if that statute then isn't imbued with life, and the mechanisms that we enact in law are not given the necessary administrative support to make those things work, then our compliance will be just that, only technical. So even though we've managed in the last 2 sittings to pass some important amendments to our existing legislative framework, these things then have to be activated as part of our regulatory processes so as to be able to achieve the level of compliance that we really need to reach. Sir, this exercise, I note the comments of the Minister in the Ministry of Finance, which he described as going down a rabbit hole. I often describe it as being the labors of Sisyphus, but I think members have heard me on that so often that I don't need to remind them who Sisyphus was and what he did. Suffice it to say, though, sir, that we will continue to be under scrutiny, but it's not just that Barbados is going to have a gun pointed at it. The world has long recognized that no matter how much we amend our laws and practices to eliminate certain legal impropriety, that the criminal-minded person will always try to find a way to get around those things. And when that happens, we will have to come back to this place. But let it be that we come back to this place only because of changing circumstances and not because, for some other reason, we invite the frown of international agencies who, for some reason or another that might be difficult to capture in an explanation, don't like how we're doing what we're doing. So this work will continue, though. I can signal to the Chamber that in the coming weeks we will have to make amendments to our Customs Act, and we will have to make amendments to our Anti-Terrorism Act to deal with other issues that have presented themselves as being deficiencies as we prepare for this assignment. And I look forward to the support of the Chamber when those further bills are brought. With those words, sir, I'm again obliged to all of the members of the Chamber for their support. And I therefore commend these bills to the Chamber for action in committee. Number 8. What? Right. So we go into committee next, right? Right. Well, I've already moved that it be read a second time, sir. And therefore, I'd like to ask, I don't think you put the question, though, so.
I remember I had to wait for you friends before I can put the question. And before it was seconded, sir.
Just trying to ease you, sir.
The question is that this bill be ready a second time. All those members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
I'd like to move that you do not leave the chair and that this House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
Question is that I do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
This House is now in committee.
Clauses 1 to 5.
Madam Chair, I'd like to move that clauses 1 to 5 stand part.
Question is that clauses 1 to 5 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. All honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clauses 6 to 10.
Beg to move that clauses 6 to 10 stand part.
Like to second that.
Question is that clauses 6 to 10 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. All honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Report. Beg to move, Madam Chair, that you report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
Question is, I now report to the Honourable Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. All honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees is reporting the passing of one bill in committee.
Beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
Question that this bill be read a third time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Money Laundering and Financing of Terrorism Prevention and Control Amendment Act of 2019.
Question that this bill be so passed and so cited. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This bill is so passed and so cited.
Order number 8, sir. In the name of the Honorable Attorney General, to move the second reading of the Corporate and Trust Service Providers Amendment Bill 2019.
Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Second that.
The question is that this bill be read a second time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do not leave the chair and that this House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
Question is that the speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
This House is now in committee.
Clauses 1 to 4.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that clause 1 stand part. You said 1 and 2?
Question is that clause 1 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Do 2 to 4.
All honorable members against, please say nay. Me think the ayes have it.
Clauses 2 to 4.
Beg to move that clauses 2 to 4 stand part.
Make a second that.
Question is that clauses 2 to 4 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All honorable members against, please say nay. Me think the ayes have it.
Beg to move that you do now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
Second that.
Question is that I now report to the honorable speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All honorable members against, please say nay. Me think the ayes have it.
Love when you can ask me that. Love when you can ask me that.
Chairman of committees is reporting passing of one bill in committee.
So what do you propose? The Speaker with, not me. I can't answer that question right now. They got coming to force, but the Speaker with, not me. So what are you going to do? Move that pass on you? Speaker, I may a bit unusual, but I ask that you leave the chair again and we revert back to committee for further consideration
Of this same said
of this same one, yes.
Second that.
Question is that the speaker don't move to the chair
Pedro?
and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
This House is now in committee.
Madam Chair, there's a slight amendment to Clause 4, which deals with the commencement of the bill. The clerk has indicated that in the bill we need to insert the following words after operation, and that is on a date fixed by proclamation. So that clause would now read, this act shall come into operation, and the added words would be on a date fixed by proclamation. I therefore propose that clause 4 be amended in those terms.
I'd like to second that.
Question is that clause 4 stand part as amended. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
I beg to move, ma'am, that you do not leave the chair and report is on the Speaker of the passing of one bill in committee with amendment.
I'd like to second that.
Question is, I now report to the Honourable Speaker the passing of one bill with amendment in committee. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Chairman of committees has reported the passing of one bill with amendments in committee.
Chair, I beg to move that this bill with amendment be read a third time.
I'd like to second that.
Question that this bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Corporate and Trust Service Providers Amendment Act of 2019.
I'd like to second that.
Question is that this bill be so passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This bill is so passed and so cited.
Order number 9, sir. In the name of the Honourable Attorney General, to move the second reading of the Financial Services Commission Amendment Bill 2019.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Question is that this bill be read a second time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do now leave the chair and that this House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of the bill.
Question that the Speaker do now leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
This is now in committee.
Clauses 1 to 5.
Beg to move that clauses 1 to 5 stand part.
Question is that clauses 1 to 5 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clauses 6 to 10.
Beg to move that clauses 6 to 10 stand part.
Second. Question is that clauses 6 to 10 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clauses 11 to 15.
Beg to move that clauses 11 to 15 stand part.
Question is that clauses 11 to 15 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clauses 16 to 18.
I beg to move, ma'am, that clauses 16 to 18 stand part.
Question is that clauses 16 to 18 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
4.
Beg to move that you do report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
Question is that I now report to the Honourable Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Chairman of committees has reported the passing of one bill in committee.
Beg to move, Mr. Speaker, that this bill be read a third time.
I'd like to second that.
Question that this bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Financial Services Commission Amendment Act of 2019.
I'd like to second that.
Question that this bill be so passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This bill is so passed and so cited.
Recommittal of messages from Her Excellency the Governor General.
I am receipt of a message from Her Excellency the Governor General. Her Excellency the Governor General to the Honorable the House of Assembly. Her Excellency the Governor General has the honor to inform the Honorable the House of Assembly that she will be absent from the country during the period 23rd April 2019 to 11th of May 2019 on vacation leave. Her Excellency further has the honor to inform the Honorable the House of Assembly that in accordance with the provisions of Section 29, subsection 1, subsection A of the Constitution, Sir Kenneth Rudolph Hewitt, KA, CBE, BJH, will perform the functions of the Office of Governor General for the period of Her Excellency's absence. Signed, Governor General, Government House, Barbados, 18th April 2019.
Recommittal of papers, sir. Jeffrey, do topics.
Honorable Member for City Bridgetown.
Mr. Speaker, I am commanded to lead the Barbados Investment and Development Corporation Annual Report 2016-2017.
Honorable Member for Christchurch East.
I am commanded to lay the Barbados National Oil Company Limited annual reports and audited financial statements for 2015.
Honorable Member for St. George South.
Mr. Speaker, I'm commanded to lay the Fair Trading Commission annual report and financial statements for the period April 1st, 2017 to March 31st, 2018.
Recommittal, sir, of government notices. Jeffrey.
Honorable Member for City Bridgetown.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of the Tourism Levy Bill 2019 and the Debt Holder Approval of Debt Restructuring Amendment Bill 2019.
Recommittal of first readings of bills.
Honorable Member for City Bridgetown.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the first reading of the Tourism Levy Bill 2019.
Second, please. Second.
Question as the aforementioned bill be ready at first time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the first reading of the Debt Holder Approval of Debt Restructuring Amendment Bill 2019.
Questions that the aforementioned bill be ready at first time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Revert to government business.
Mr. Speaker, we come to the end of today's sitting. Before adjourning, let me remind all honorable members of the presentation that is to be done for honorable members at 2:30 this afternoon. And, in the West Wing at 2:30 p.m. I now beg to move the adjournment of this sitting until Tuesday, the 30th of April at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.
Beg to second.
The question is that this honorable chamber be adjourned until the 30th day of April 2019 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. This honorable chamber stands adjourned until the 30th day of April 2019 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.
I was hoping, ma'am, at the PM.